Yeah.
Yeah, you'll come across looking real good.
All right, we are live after a little bit of technical difficulties. We've got everything worked out, all the kinks worked out, hopefully. My name is Tim, the Bible Thumping Wingnut, and you're listening to a podcast which is originating as a Google Hangout on the BibleThumpingWingnut.com YouTube channel. With me is Matt Slick from carm.org and Scott, who has a YouTube channel. Been on YouTube for a very long time. Doesn't make a lot of videos, but the videos that he makes are very popular in the atheist community. His YouTube channel's name is Theoretical BS, and he doesn't say BS. He says, well, you'll spell out BS if you want to go search his stuff. So this is a special Google Hangout on a Sunday night. Normally we have a number of guests. This week we just have Scott, and this meeting came about as a result of somebody who knows you, Scott. I don't know who Bob is, but he contacted me on Skype, and he said, hey, you really should try to contact this person, and because I was asking for a knowledgeable we had some unruly non-believers on, and we wanted to have a calm discussion, and as soon as he told me who it was that he was referring to, I was very happy to contact you and line this up. And when I heard, so it's good to have you, and I've known about your channel for probably about over a year. I started making videos about 2 years ago, and started making videos about objective morality being an evidence for God. Many people sent me your video called Treason on Morality. And
Treatise.
Yeah. Treatise on Morality, and that's your most popular video, over 250,000 views on that video. And I watched that and made some comments, and so that's how I came to know about who you are, and I watched some of your other videos. You come across as a very educated guy, nice guy, and it's an honor to have you here. I know you've had some interaction with Matt before, but I really wanted to get this meeting so that all the other supposed live talk debates were on an old platform, and there's it's hard to hear, there's delays and all kinds of things. So this is going to be good for the two of you, for all of us to see and to hear you interact with each other and clarify your terms and make clear where you stand, where your position is. So I'm just going to sit back and relax, and at the end we'll have some closing comments and wrap it up. But I would like the two of you to engage with objective morality, because Scott, I know that if I understand you right, you do believe that morals are objective. And your sound is gone. If you just use your laptop microphone, we'll be able to hear you. It'll sound like you're in an empty room, but no.
Well, he was working before. Just use the, if you unplug it, well, I don't have a Mac.
You've got yourself muted now. Okay. Yeah, we'll be able to hear you. But if you do have it,
sorry, I hate this sound, that open room sound. It's such bad quality. I hate that.
No, it sounds pretty good actually.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool.
It's not as good as some, but it's not bad. Seriously, no big deal.
Okay. I'm so sorry for listening for the technical difficulties. We worked on this for like 5-10 minutes before, and we thought we had it.
Yeah.
All right. It happens.
Matt gave some very good advice, some very good technical advice, which worked a second ago.
It was a temporary answer to prayer.
Yeah.
So yes, Scott, objective morality, if I understand your stance.
Yeah, it's going to depend. A lot of this conversation is going to depend on what we mean by certain words. I believe that the parts of morality that are important, that we need to be objective, are objective. There are other parts of morality that I don't think are objective in the sense that Matt would want, for example. But I'll be able to parse all that out soon enough, I think.
Well, then we got to define our terms. So, what do you mean by objective morality? I'm taking notes. I don't know if you can hear me typing, but I type.
Yeah, would you mind? I actually, I hope this would be okay with you. I come to this conversation not bringing an argument to you, but I'm interested in your argument. I'm interested in your argument via morality for God. Would you mind if we started from the bottom up and you presented me with that argument, and then we can kind of go little by little?
Well, I've not really codified the argument that I've been developing over time, but I could say something. Let me just kind of put some stuff together. Truth is a statement. Truth requires a mind because it's a statement that agrees with actuality and or logic, possibility, and things like that. So if I were to say, for example, and I got a cup of espresso in my hand here, nice little espresso, keep me up all night. If I were to say this is a zebra, you know, obviously it'd be wrong because, well, it's just not a zebra. And so a statement, it's called the correspondence theory of truth. A statement agrees with actuality, things like that. So, you know, you and I are talking, you and I are conversing, it's true. If there are no minds, there are no truths. So if something is true, the implication is it requires a mind. Now, some people say, well, what if the only thing in the universe was a big rock? Would it be true? Well, it's true that we're saying that now requires a mind, but if there were no minds, there would be no truth, etc. Okay, that's not a big deal. So when I take this, I'm thinking about this, how does a moral statement acquire its truth value? Because if I were to say it's wrong to murder, I could say, could you close the window, please? Thanks. My wife's over there. The next door neighbor's dogs just started barking. Thanks, hon. If I were to say, you know, it's wrong to murder, well, why is it wrong to murder? Well, I could say, well, God tells us, and that's a whole other topic. But if a statement acquires its truth value, there has to be a means and a relationship, it would seem, of correspondence by which it could obtain its value of truth. And we can't have it be arbitrary, because if I were to say blue is better morally than green, which makes no sense, it just doesn't have any truth value to it. So morality deals with actions. So, and this would never happen. I mean, you seem like a real nice guy, and I hope you know I'm a nice guy. I'd never punch you, but let's say I punch you in the, you know, I go down there, I'd see you, and you know, I punch you, and I go, oh, I'm sorry. And you take a swing at me back, now we're even. And so we both apologize to each other for our actions. So actions have a moral value. But if I were to say blue, there's no moral value to it. So in the issue of morality, how do we obtain a moral value? How do we obtain a moral thing? Well, you were saying we do it by assigning a value. I think you said something to the effect of that which reduces harm and increases happiness. That's an oversimplification, but that's a basic idea. And but then how does that truth statement, or how does that statement acquire its truth value? See, in an atheistic worldview, I don't see how there can be any justification for it to be a universal truth value. Because here's the problem. And I'm going to pick on you, but I'm not picking on you. I'm just talking, all right? So if you were to say, you know, if you were to say that murder is wrong, if you were just saying it, what gives you the right to make sure that that statement is true? And if you are in control of people's lives, what gives you the right to impose that value on anybody else if it's simply a view that you were to hold to? And same with me. It wouldn't apply. When we have a moral value, we have to determine that the action has value to it. But here's a problem. If we were to say that the consequence is what determines the value, then we're transferring arbitrarily the consequence of an action from the action. That an action in different contexts might have a different value, terminal value. And so then it becomes arbitrary at what's called a terminus, or the goal. It's a teleological moral system. And it becomes arbitrary and self-refuting ultimately. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, great. This is all a great place to start. I've noticed that I've noticed two different kinds of ways you can have this conversation about morality and what it is and what its foundations are. And I like to call them the top-down way and the bottom-up way. So we can talk about, we can go top-down. So we can say we have this intuitive sort of idea of morality, of right and wrong. We kind of have a vague, fuzzy notion of what, most people have a vague understanding of what they mean by right and wrong in their head already. So we can take this kind of vague, fuzzy concept and we can analyze it, and we can figure out, if anything, what it could mean that would apply, that we can map onto the real world. So that's one way to have the conversation. Another way to have a conversation would be the bottom up. So we can talk about what we're interested in. Like, I don't so much care about the word morality. It's just a word. Words have arbitrary definitions always. You can always assign any meaning you want to any combination of syllables and sounds. What I'm interested in is maximizing happiness and flourishing and well-being, and minimizing unnecessary suffering and pain and so forth. And we can talk about the best way to make use of that kind of philosophy, and then after the fact we can call that morality if we want to call that morality, and if we don't want to call that morality, we don't have to call that morality. So it sounds like maybe you're more interested in a top-down kind of conversation. Which is totally cool with me. You mentioned something about, if I say that murder is wrong, if I say that wrong is something that causes unnecessary suffering, vaguely, that there's no way to assign a truth value to that. That's arbitrary. Well, that's right, because that's not a truth claim. That's a definition. Definitions are always arbitrary. The meanings we assign to certain words or letters, that's always arbitrary. It's what we do with that definition once it is in place that makes the big difference, that does the philosophical work. So I would like to ask you, when you say like X is right or X is wrong, or it's always immoral to do such and such, when you use words like right, wrong, moral, immoral, what exactly do you mean by those words? What exactly are you referring to? How are you using those words?
I'm using them in sentences, but as a Christian, we simply recite, so to speak, reiterate the knowledge and the will of God, that He has declared to us or revealed to us those things which are right or wrong. Now, I'll admit this with you, that a lot of Christians are very inconsistent. A lot of Christians don't think these things through very well, and that's just a fact. A lot of them don't. That's all right. But when we get into this issue, what we're talking about here is the philosophy of morality. Now, from a Christian perspective, I can account for absolutes. I can account for moral absolutes which exist. From your perspective, you can't, because your worldview doesn't allow transcendentals.
I think that's getting ahead of ourselves. I don't want to go there quite yet. I promise you we'll definitely get to that. But I do want to know, I mean, this is very important, and one of us or both of us is liable to start obfuscating unless we get this clear right away. So when you say rape is wrong or rape is immoral, what is it that you, Matt, when you say that, what is it that you are describing about rape that makes it wrong? Or put another way, what is it that all wrong behaviors and actions have in common that distinguish them from all right actions and behaviors? Or put yet another way, how would you identify something is wrong? What facts need to be true about a given behavior or action in order for it to be wrong?
It's wrong if it disagrees with the revealed will of God.
Great. Okay. So in that sense, clearly I don't believe in right and wrong, right? But that can't be the end of the conversation. That has to be the beginning of the conversation. So where we go from here will be much more interesting. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So you say when you say words like right and wrong, moral and immoral, what you are referring to, what you really mean by that, what you're saying is this action or behavior is, I'm gonna say this very recklessly and sloppily, and you can refine for me. But what you're saying is that that action or behavior, if it's moral, is consistent with God's immutable nature. And when you say that something is immoral, or you could go the command way. You could say that what makes it moral, what you're saying about something when you say that it's moral is that God has commanded it. And when you say that something is immoral, you're saying that God has commanded against it, or that it is antithetical to God's nature. That's basically what you mean when you use those words, right?
No, we don't. I don't affirm, and Christians should not affirm to the divine command theory that God just simply arbitrarily makes certain statements about what will be and what will not be right or wrong. Instead, he reveals it out of his character. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Euthyphro dilemma.
Oh no, I have. That's why I gave you both options. Some people like divine command theory. Other people say that it's God's nature. It's God's nature and essence.
Yeah, that's not the Euthyphro dilemma. The Euthyphro dilemma doesn't include God's nature as a third possible option.
Oh, so, believe, trust me. You can ask the Euthyphro dilemma pertaining to God's nature. You simply have to ask: Is God's nature what it is because it's good, or are good things good because they reflect God's nature?
Well, God is the standard of all righteousness. Without Him, nothing can be justified ultimately.
Right. So when you say that, with that, we would have to say that the phrase "God is good" is either circular or meaningless, because what you really mean is God is Himself. You don't mean anything other than God is Himself, right?
No, when we talk about God and good, we're talking about ontology and morality, and those are different relationships in different categories. So we're identifying God, the Christian concept, the one true, eternal, immutable being without beginning, without end, invariant, who's omniscient, omnipotent, omnisapient, etc. And good is a quality that He is the standard of. And so we would discover what good is by by Him revealing His character to us. We would discover that.
Right, right. What I'm getting at is that when you discover what good is, when you say good, there's nothing about, let's say God's nature is one of honesty, right? There's no external standard to God here by which we are evaluating that God should have the attribute of honesty because God's good. When we say that honesty is good, all we're saying is that honesty is reflective of God's nature, which is honest. So when you say that God is good, you're saying that God has the traits and qualities He has, and He doesn't have the traits and qualities He doesn't have. But it would be interesting for you to be, like, if we could hide behind a veil of ignorance about God, if there were no revelation about God, you have forfeited the ability to say, okay, not knowing anything about a perfectly good God, God can't be dishonest, because you don't have an external standard from God to evaluate that a perfectly good God would have to be honest. The only way you can know that a perfectly good God would have to be honest is by looking at whatever characteristics and attributes God happens to have, right?
Right. He has to be self-revelatory, otherwise it's arbitrary.
Right. So how is what is good and what is evil, or what is moral and what is immoral, not in some sense a matter of chance or arbitrariness or randomness?
It would not be chance or arbitrary if it was revealed out of God's immutable, consistent, eternal character.
Right. Okay, so can God choose His character?
No.
Does God have control over His character?
It's like saying, do you have control over what you are? And if you do, that's part of what your nature is. It's a tautologist question. It's kind of a non sequitur logically. So saying you have control over what you are, it didn't really make any sense.
Kind of a nonsense question, right? Yeah, okay, I agree with you. So it doesn't make sense to ask. The answer to that is really no. God doesn't choose, God doesn't have control over His character and His nature. So what does determine God's character and nature?
That's something you have to ask God.
Like, would it be impossible? Here's a question. Here's a hypothetical thought experiment. Is there something logically impossible or otherwise impossible about God having a dishonest nature instead of an honest nature?
Well, if I were to risk subjecting God to my reasoning, which
Not
would
your
be
reason.
a problem, I would say that lying is a self-refuting concept. And since God is what he is, he cannot not be not what he is. Therefore, I would say that lying, for example, would be dishonest, would be an inconsistency with his own character and nature.
Right,
That
I know.
would be just an opinion. But Titus 1:2 says God cannot lie. He's just revealing his character. So we just take it by faith that is the case with him.
Right. Yeah, we're on the same page there. God can't change his character, and his character is what makes the things good or bad. The question is, is there any possible world? You're familiar with possible worlds, right?
Yeah, if you want to go there, that'll blow up in your face, though. But go ahead.
It's just one tool, epistemic tool for talking. About this. Is there a possible world, or is it logically possible for the God you believe in to have a nature that is dishonest instead of the honest one you believe he currently has?
By definition, no, since he's the greatest of all beings. There can be no other being besides him in any circumstance, so it's just not possible. So the answer is no. Great,
perfect. So is there anything preventing God from having a dishonest nature other than definition?
His own nature.
No, I know that he has this nature, but could he have had any other nature eternally than the one he has? Is there any world?
I would assume. I can't speak for God. I would assume he has his nature eternally, and since he is what he is, he can't be anything other than what he is. He is what he is, so he has to have what he is.
So is there a reason that God has the nature he has and not some other nature?
If I were to say that there's a reason that God had a certain nature, then I'd be subjecting God's very essence to my reasoning.
Okay, all right. So what you're saying is there is no and cannot be any reason that God has the nature he has and not some other nature.
No, I wouldn't say there cannot be any reason. That's a universal negative. I don't know all possible reasons, except to say that God simply is what he is, and we recognize what he is through his self-revelation.
Okay, is it possible that there is a reason that God has the nature he has and not some other nature?
The reason he has the nature he has is because he has the nature that he has.
Yeah, that is the very thing I'm asking to be explained. You can't explain the thing I'm asking to be explained.
I can't explain how God is what he is.
Okay, and is that because is that just an epistemic limit on your part, or is that there can be no explanation? It is inexplicable why God has the.
One of the let me type it in here is a phrase that we use in theology. God is wholly other. H-O-L-L-Y. What we're saying there is that he is completely different than we are. Where he exists outside of the universe and is transcendent, we are inside the universe and non-transcendent. So when we go to talk about God, the only way we can do it, and I do this in Bible studies, as I say, the only way to recognize God is to look at the person and work of Jesus. So if I were to say, what color is divinity? How much does the ontological nature of God's character weigh? All these are non sequiturs. They don't follow logically. It's like saying, what color is the human essence? It just doesn't apply. It's a wrong question. So when we say God is wholly other, we're saying that he is so completely different than us that we cannot recognize him, know him, or anything of him unless he chooses to reveal himself to us, and he's done that in the person of Jesus Christ.
Sure, God is mysterious, but we're still going to do the best we can as rational human beings, right? We're going to try to get to the bottom of this morality thing and figure out really what it is, ontically, and whether or not it requires a theistic foundation, because it really is going to depend on a lot of these issues. What I'm challenging right now is, not even challenging, what I'm exploring right now is the way in which you believe God is the foundation of morality, the way in which morality can be based on God. And from how it sounds, from what you've said so far, it seems as if we could do a hypothetical thought experiment, right? And in this hypothetical world, God has all the opposite qualities of the qualities he has. Instead of being loving, he's hateful. Instead of being honest, he's dishonest. But because God is the standard of morality, because his nature and essence, his immutable nature and essence, is the standard of morality, in this alternate universe, this alternate world, dishonesty is moral and honesty is immoral. Hatred is moral and love is immoral. Now, you could admit that, you could concede that, and you could say, well, actually, yes. Or you're shaking your head. Or you could say, no, this world you're talking about is not even coherent. It's not even logically possible for this world. Right? It's intrinsically impossible, this world I'm describing.
Well, I would say that if I were to respond by saying it's logically impossible, you might want to jump on that like a monkey in a cupcake and just say, how would I know it's logically impossible? Then I'm on the defensive trying to give a logical reason for something that answers to God. What I would prefer to say is simply that you want me to entertain a situation that violates the very principles upon which I stand in order to argue from a different perspective. I cannot violate those principles and say that God is anything other than what he is.
Well, sure you can.
He's honest and good. I wouldn't do that because to me that would be idolatrous and blasphemous, so I can't entertain that.
Well, you understand the value of a thought experiment, right?
Sure I do, as long as it doesn't violate my concept and understanding of the great majesty and holiness of God, sure, no problem.
Right. But thought experiments are just diagnostic tools.
I do them all the time, absolutely.
Okay, I once heard you give at the beginning of this conversation, actually, you gave you performed a thought experiment in which there was nothing but I can't remember the object you said. Maybe it was a baseball.
Rock.
What was it?
Rock. I usually use the expression a carbon sphere, but that's okay.
Right. If there was nothing but a rock or a carbon sphere, no mind at all, already that's kind of idolatrous. This scenario is idolatrous. So I would imagine that you would be open to hypothetically talking about a universe in which God has different qualities.
It's different to talk about a condition of what that defines truth versus redefining God's character.
The question is,
God exists, he's holy and he's righteous, and he reveals his will to us, and he reveals the morals to us that are reflective of his character, and that's how we know that we have absolute transcendent morals and that they are objective. Okay, so let's do it this way. Is the statement God is dishonest logically impossible? Yes. Why? Because God can't be dishonest. Why not? Because it's against his nature. And well, right. That's it. His nature is his nature, but why can't his nature be different? Because it isn't. That's not why it can't. That's why it isn't. It just isn't is also why it can't. If it is what it is and it's immutable and it's holy and it's forever, then it can't be anything else. Oh, no. I'm not talking about his nature turning dishonest from honest. I'm saying wipe the slate clean, do this thought experiment behind a veil of ignorance. You know nothing about God. There's no revelation. You don't know the kind of being God is. And somebody comes to you, hands you a Bible, say, and it's different from the Bible you know. You've never seen a Bible before, but this Bible says that God is immutably dishonest. Is there something about that you can look at and you can go, no, this is not possible? That would be an inconsistency. Inconsistency with what? If someone's going to be dishonest or inconsistent with themselves. Being dishonest isn't necessarily being inconsistent with oneself. It's making statements that are inconsistent with the truth. Right. And since you're saying something that's inconsistent with the truth, you're being inconsistent. Right. So is there anything about... Look, I mean, it's not logically impossible for you and I to say something false. I can say something false right now. There's coffee in this mug. Well, there's actually tea, so I've now lied. But I haven't done anything logically impossible. Why would it be logically impossible for God to be dishonest, knowing nothing else about God a priori? Well, logic is a process of God's mind, and since God is consistent within himself, the logic must also be consistent. And since lying is inconsistent, God cannot lie because it would be illogical, which violates his own character. I'm not entirely sure you and I are on the same page here. Of course we're not. You're an atheist and I'm a Christian.
No. I'm happy to come to you. I mean, I'm operating within the Christian worldview right now. I'm kind
Not
of
really.
looking under the hood and asking you questions. I'm asking you questions about. I mean, if we assume that Christianity is true, and Christianity is the foundation for morality. Well, God's nature is the foundation of morality. This raises a whole bunch of very, very important questions about how that is the case. And it sounds what I'm really getting at here, Matt, is that on your view of morality, you have no standard by which to evaluate that God is good and that God is a good standard of morality other than God himself. So you wouldn't know if God were an evil God, if God had our worst interests in mind, if God wanted nothing more than the worst possible misery for everyone, none of that would matter. There's no way by which you can evaluate that God is good and worthy of using as a standard of morality, because God is the standard you're using to evaluate the standard. It's kind of a vicious circle which you can't escape. And I think that's quite problematic.
You say I don't have a standard of morality by which I could judge God's morality.
Well, you don't have a standard by which to judge that God is a good standard of morality.
So you want me to judge God? You want me to be an atheist?
It's not that I'm asking you to judge God. I'm saying that you can't, by definition, right? You have no basis to judge God.
Exactly. I have no right and no ability. To say that we're going to judge God's morality is to imply that we are the ones who are the judges of morality, that we have sufficient wisdom, and that we know enough things to know whether or not all actions can be judged as right or wrong. That's rather preposterous.
Okay, so suppose you come to me and you say, hey, look, you should I don't know, not have gay sex. There we go. There's one. You should not have gay sex. And I say, well, why, Matt? Why shouldn't I have gay sex? And you say, because gay sex is wrong. And I say, well, what do you mean that it's wrong? And you say, well, it's contrary to God's immutable and unchanging essence and nature. And I say, well, why should I care about that? It's also what's the difference between God and like Jerry, the guy down the street? I mean, why should I care what God's immutable and unchanging nature is? And you say, well, obviously because God is good. So God, I mean, since God's unchanging and immutable nature is good, then you should do what God wants. And then I say, well, how do I know that God is good? And you say, well, because what I mean by good is that which reflects God's nature. And so at the end of the day, at the end of the conversation, Matt, I'm left thinking, yeah, I really don't see any reason to behave in the way that this being wants me to behave, because I have we've forfeited the ability to make a rational assessment of this being as being a good foundation for morality. I mean, it's a good, that in itself is enough for any rational human being to reject God as the foundation for morality, because it's unevaluatable.
Well, yeah, from that system, then you lead to moral agnosticism, because what you're doing is arguing yourself into a corner, and what you're doing is being inconsistent. See, God, by definition, knows all things. He knows all things actual as well as potential. We do not. So Jerry down the street doesn't compare to God. If God's going to reveal something to us, he's going to have reasons for those revelations and desires that we may not understand at certain levels in certain areas.
Can I ask a question about that?
Go ahead.
Or would you like to finish? If you're getting to a point, then that's totally cool. But I have a really big question about that.
Go ahead. Ask the question.
Okay. You just said that God, I mean, you invoked omniscience, which is not something we've really been talking about, but you brought up omniscience, and that makes me think that you see omniscience as something relevant to morality. And immediately a question mark went off in my head. Well, what does omniscience have to do with morality? Why does God being omniscient enable him to be a better standard of morality than Jerry down the street? So my question is God in a position, is God the standard of morality because he knows facts that we don't know? And if only we had access to those facts, if only we knew those facts, then we wouldn't need God?
Let me finish. You say that you say in your video that morality is that which reduces harm. And I brought up earlier, I'll just use that statement. It's not the complete and accurate reflection of what you're saying, but just for a shorthand version. You know, increases harmony, reduces harm. Okay. There's different variations of that. So when you say moral, what is moral is that which reduces harm. What you're doing is saying the end is the reason that the action is good or bad. If I were to say that God is omniscient and he knows the ends of all things, and so therefore he can declare to you and reveal to you certain actions that you should and should not do, then he's doing the very same thing that you say you do when you assign moral value by assigning it to the end result. God's omniscience means he knows all end results and can make perfect judgments. So it's very related. His omniscience is very related to the moral right and wrong.
That's really interesting. I could get behind that. You know, I see. Okay, so let's say I'm a general theist or somebody open to the idea of Christian theism. Now, the idea that what we mean by right and wrong has to do with the consequences, the consequences of these actions. But because we don't know always the consequences of these actions, we might need to defer to an omniscient being which does know the consequences of these actions. Well, what we've done now is we've turned God into not necessarily the standard, but the middleman who is able to pass the information along to us. But really, what makes something right and wrong in this scenario is the consequence, not necessarily God.
Well, I didn't say that was the standard. I already said that the standard of God's morality is on character, but certain actions that we might not have knowledge of, that might have certain consequences later on, God could say, do this and don't do that. It can get very complicated in the mind of God, and I certainly can't speak for him. I'm just saying theoretically that's certainly a reason why we could say that his omniscience could play a factor in the issue of moral right and wrong.
But on your theology, I just want to make sure, it is not the consequences that make something right or wrong,
Correct.
Something wrong because of how well they reflect God's immutable nature.
Well, to take the cover off the pot here and let the stew boil a little bit heavier, God works all things after the counsel of his will. His will is for the purpose of bringing the greatest glory to him, which is why we're created in Isaiah 43:7. Even those who go to hell are going to go there for the greater glory of God. You may not like that, but that's the way it is. He does all things after the character of his own nature and his essence, and he reveals himself to us. That's the Christian concept of what is moral. There is no possibility for us to reach up to the clouds and bring God down and say, I will now judge the morality. I need a standard at which I can judge morality. The problem with that is that it's a bit self-refuting. Because if you're not knowledgeable of all things, you're not the creator, you don't have all the attributes that God has, how would you know what is the right standard of morality by which you could judge whether or not God is moral or right? You wouldn't. You can only have a subjective standard. If something is subjective, you can't know for sure if anything is true or right or wrong. You therefore are self-refuting in the sense that if you want a subjective standard, morality, a morality system based in what your preferences are and your observations and stuff like that, and you want to reach up to the immutable objective God, then you're committing a category mistake as well as being overly subjective, and you're making a mistake in applying the latter to the former. It doesn't work.
So, okay, so if we were having this conversation, let's take the kind of conversation we're having. But instead of talking about right and wrong, moral and immoral, we were talking about a 12-inch distance. And so you hold up a ruler, right? And you say, and you point to the ruler and you say, this is the standard of a foot. This is the standard. Now you don't know the right and wrong. You have no way to find out objectively what the standard of a foot is. And I might come along and I might say, but a foot is whatever we decide it to be. The standard is always arbitrary. What we evaluate against that standard is either objectively true or false. But there is no magic ruler in the sky. Now, you seem to be saying something different when it comes to God. With God, you seem to be saying that God is the magic ruler in the sky.
Whoa. I did not bring up the word magic. I noticed that atheists often do that, and then next comes a flying spaghetti monster, and then invisible pink unicorns. And so, you know, I mean, if you want to go there with magic and stuff, I mean, that's fine. Atheists always bring that stuff up before I ever do.
You could take the word magic out of that sentence, and it would mean exactly the same thing. Nothing hinders.
Well, yeah, but let me just kind of complain a little bit, politely. When you use the word magic, it'd be like me saying, and I wouldn't say this, but it was like me saying, well, you and your stupid atheism. No, I'm not saying that, okay? But you see the connotations that go along with what you're doing there with the word magic ruler in the sky.
You know I didn't call God magic, right, Matt?
Yeah, magic ruler.
Right.
Magic standard, right. Yeah, I don't believe in magic. I don't know, do you?
No.
Good.
Okay, well, so your complaint is...
Well, we're done. But okay. I noticed you didn't address my issue, raising the thing is that you have a subjective standard by which you want to judge God as morally right or wrong. How do you know that your subjectivity is the right one?
No. This is exactly what I was trying to address. This is what I'm asking you. Okay, so you say, okay, so
I'm asking you.
I have this standard, right? And my standard is that which is moral. What I mean by that which is moral is that which maximizes happiness and health and well-being. What I mean by that which is immoral is that which causes unnecessary suffering and harm. And your response to that is, well, that's subjective. That's just your subjective take on. You're just subjectively assigning meanings to these words. It doesn't really like out there capital M mean what you're saying it means. That's just the definition you're assigning to it arbitrarily.
No.
No, that's not what you would say?
Well, notice what you're doing is you're a clever guy, okay? And what you're doing is slightly reinterpreting some of the things I say.
I'm just trying to get to the bottom of this. So if that's not what you would say, then tell me what you would say instead. I promise you I'm having this conversation with you in good faith.
No problem at all. No problem at all. You have a subjective standard of morality based on your own preferences.
Right.
Okay. Why is that the right standard by which you would judge whether or not God is or is not?
Wait. When you say preferences, what do you mean by preferences? You mean my preferences in how to define the term?
You define good as the increase of happiness, reduction of unnecessary harm, not just harm. I know you know that sometimes harm is good for somebody. You know, you got to cut into them to save something. You know, yeah. But so if I misspeak and say to reduce harm, I don't mean to trap you and say do that later. It just means misspeaking and not saying unnecessary harm. So increasing happiness, reducing harm. Increasing and reducing unnecessary harm. Okay, so why is that the standard? You picked it. Why is that the right one?
Well, this is what I'm saying. So it's just a definition, right? It's just.
Yeah, but why is that the right definition?
Okay, so how is when I ask you, well, what do you mean by moral and immoral? And you say, well, what I mean is that which reflects God's nature and that which doesn't reflect God's nature. How is that any less subjective?
Well, when God says don't lie, then I know I don't lie. In fact, I was literally last night on the web talking to a chat person, a technical chat person. My website's having some server problems. And the person said, well, all you have to do is tell me that you're going to do, and they recommended something for me to do which was beyond my ability to do, a technical solution. And I said, all you got, she said, I think it was a she, all you got to do is say you're going to do this, I can turn the server back on. I couldn't do it. Because I couldn't lie, even though it would benefit me greatly. See, I couldn't do it. And I told her, I can't tell you what I will not do. It'd be lying. I'm sorry. So you see, the standard is not subjective. It doesn't depend on circumstance, my desires, my wants, my preferences. It's on God's character revealed to me in the Word.
Okay, there might be a hiccup here. This might be a point of us talking past each other. Are you using standard the way that I'm using definition, or
I don't know.
Using it differently?
Because I don't think your definitions are all that clear. I don't think you understand what it is you're getting at either. Because I don't think you've thought through these issues. When you talk about the nature, it's an epistemological issue. You're talking about the nature of knowing what is morally right or wrong, and then you have an arbitrary standard. Because it's arbitrary, you can never get to an absolute definition.
Okay, then if you think I'm being unclear, then let me be more clear for you. When I say that my standard of morality is that which is the harm and suffering and all that stuff, what I'm saying is something very, very simple. Something what I hope is not very easy to misinterpret. What I'm saying is that what I mean by these words is such and such. Now, when you say that God is the now when you talk about standard, I think you mean something different. I don't think you're actually talking about what I mean by these words is such and such. I think you're talking about something different than that. Am I right?
I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, so I'm not sure.
Well, you know what you mean by standard. I can't read your mind. I can tell you what I mean. I just did, and you can tell me now if you mean the same thing or not. I can't answer that for you.
So ask your question again.
Okay. When I say when I use the word standard, all I'm saying is that what I mean by this word is that what I mean by moral is that which promotes happiness and health and whatever. And what I mean by immoral, I'm using standard synonymously with definition.
Yeah.
Is that how you're using standard?
My standard is based on the revelation of God.
I'm not asking you what your standard is. I'm asking you what you mean by the word standard.
That standard is that which is the norm by which you judge other or all actions.
Right, and is that standard, who chooses that standard?
God.
So God chooses that He is the standard.
He doesn't choose it, He reveals it.
Right. I just asked you who chooses that standard, and you said God.
God is the one who reveals the standard to us. It's like choosing it means He has options. Should I go with lying or not lying? No, He just reveals. So
God is your standard. God is the thing that helps you determine what is right and what is wrong. But that's only because what you mean by right and wrong is that which reflects God's nature and that which doesn't. But what if What if you don't care about what reflects God's nature and what doesn't?
Then I might as well be an atheist.
Okay, so this is important because what I've been working toward this whole time, what I want to get back to is what kind of argument you're really making here. Because there's a couple of different kinds of ways you could be arguing here. One is a sort of inference to the best explanation kind of thing, where you say, here's this phenomenon, right? Here's this phenomenon that we all see, we can all observe exists, and I think I don't think atheism can account for this phenomenon. I think the best explanation for this phenomenon, the only way to account for this phenomenon is God, and that's why it's rational to believe in God and it's irrational to be an atheist. That's one kind of way you could be arguing. Another kind of way, well, let me ask, is that what you're arguing? Are we doing an inference to the best explanation?
That's one of the ways. It's called a what's it called? Oh, there's a phrase for it. Sorry. Oh man, I hate when I just do that. Every now and then I just forget a phrase. It's a syllogistic. Anyway, you only have A or not A. If not A, then B. Modus ponens, but there's another term for it.
Well, that's different from inference to the best explanation, though.
I know what I'm talking about is this: is that if you only have two options, and one of them is negated, then the other is automatically validated. Impossibility to the contrary. If we have a moral absolute and a moral set and a moral standard, and we do have moral absolutes out there, and I can give you one that I ubiquitously use with atheists that we can discuss. How does an atheist account for the ubiquity of it? And it's really simple. We could talk about the philosophy of moral realism and the essence of ontological action. The ontos of certain and why certain actions have certain moral values to them. From the non-theistic perspective, your perspective and the next atheist perspective might agree, they might not agree. There's no way to determine which one is true unless we go outside of both of yours and look to a standard that has to be objective. Because if there is no objective standard, then I might as well watch you two atheists argue about what particular nuance of a moral right or wrong is the right one, because both of them are arbitrary. It's just whoever's the better arguer. If you want to talk about moral absolutes, which I can give you one, the question then becomes, can you justify such moral absolutes in your worldview? You can't. I can in mine. And because we only have two options and yours is negated, then the other is validated.
Okay, got it. Okay, this is good. So the phenomenon, so this is an inference to the best explanation. We have this phenomenon that we can both battle over who accounts for it best, or who can account for it and who can't. The phenomenon in question, though, is very interesting. The phenomenon is what you call moral absolutes. Now, here's what's interesting to me about that. Suppose you and I are doing the same conversation, except it's not about moral absolutes, it's the tooth fairy. Now, if you can't account for the tooth fairy and I can't account, which one of us can better account for the tooth fairy? Well, isn't that's kind of a silly conversation?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll argue against the actual existence of a tooth fairy. You argue for it. Let's see how that goes for a while.
No. That's not the point. The point is we both...
Oh, you don't want to actually do what it is you're talking about?
No.
If you're going to raise it, let's go and see how the theory works.
Don't be disingenuous, Matt. You know
I'm not, because I know what it'll do. I know what'll happen. Either tooth fairy exists or tooth fairy does not exist.
Well, the thing about a tooth fairy is a tooth fairy doesn't exist as defined.
How do you know?
That's not the point. We both agree that the tooth fairy doesn't exist. Now, here's the question. How do you know that these logical absolutes exist?
Because they reflect the mind of God. They're transcendental. They're universal.
What do you... Okay, so let me ask you, what do you mean? What is it you are referring to? What is the ontology of these moral absolutes? Because
moral absolutes are conceptual.
I think, Matt, where this is going to break down is that you believe these moral absolutes exist. Indeed, not only do you believe they exist, but you believe they are necessary for morality, and I don't. So that's
no. You can be moral without believing in God.
No, for
I suspect that, you know, if I was over visiting you, I'm down in L.A., whatever, and I drop my wallet on the way out of your place, I expect you to say, hey, Matt, here's your wallet, you know, and after you go through it, take all the cash out. But I expect you to at least turn it back.
I'm not talking about being moral. I'm talking about justifying morality.
Yeah. Objective morality, you can't justify from your system. I can.
Right. Okay, so that's the question. Maybe what you mean when you say objective morality is something I don't believe in, and therefore, why would I try to justify? Why would I?
Now we're getting someplace. So an objective moral is a moral truth that is not dependent upon us for its validity.
Oh, well, okay. Now we're getting somewhere. A moral truth. We got two different concepts here. And it's very important for us not to conflate them. We don't want to equivocate. We want to be very, very clear about these terms that we're using. So you got moral absolute over here that you use sometimes. And then you say a moral truth. Now, I know what a moral truth is. I'm not clear on what a logical absolute, but here, let me tell you what a moral truth is. A moral truth is a statement that, as defined, can be either true or false. A statement, truth is simply a certain type of relationship between a statement and reality. That is to say that if the statement tracks reality, we call that relationship true. If it doesn't track reality, we call that relationship false. But a truth is not an actual thing that exists. A truth is a relationship between two things.
Does your thought exist?
It depends on what you mean by a thought. If what you mean, I think a thought occurs. I don't know if a thought is a thing that exists.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a thing. It's spatial.
When you say logical absolutes, what do you mean by that? Do you just mean moral truth?
Logical absolutes or moral absolutes?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just added like a flashback to tag. Isn't that interesting? But it's a lot the same language. When you say moral absolutes, what are you referring to?
Those universally true moral principles. They're not dependent upon us. Okay, so I'll give you one. You ready?
Ready for what?
Want me to give you one, and we can argue it?
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine the kinds of things you would say as an example. You know, don't torturing a baby for fun. You know, that's a big apologetic one.
So when I developed that, and when I was debating Dan Barker, it is always wrong for everyone to torture babies to death merely for their personal pleasure. Now, I would say that's always true for everyone, and the reason I would say is because God has revealed to us that we're not to murder, we're not to do things like that. So therefore I have a standard by which I can say that statement is true because it comports with the revelation of God. Okay, now, how would you say it was true or false, or would you?
Right. Okay. So I
Come on now, you've been quizzing me now for almost an hour, so let me ask you.
I'm going to answer you. I am going to answer you. Obviously, I think that's true. But
why?
Because of what I mean when I say wrong. Now, I don't know.
You're arbitrarily defining it?
Well, I think you're arbitrarily defining right and wrong as well.
I haven't defined it yet, except to say it's the standard of God's revelation.
You told me when you say that something is wrong, what you mean by that is that it reflects God's nature.
It goes against the character of God.
It goes against God's nature. Sorry, yeah.
Right.
So we both. But again, there's no dictionary. Choose whatever we want a word to mean. I mean, it's all definitions.
I don't agree. If that's the case, then all I got to do is say to you, Scott, everything you're saying agrees with me. If all we want to do is say that words can mean whatever we want them to mean, then blue sleeps faster than Wednesday, and you've lost everything we've said because your hair's not right.
Well, it just depends on it. It does depend on what you mean by that. See, what this is about is what you're referring to by morality may be something that I don't even think exists, and therefore I have no obligation to account for.
Well, whether you think it exists or not isn't the issue. Well, actually, it really is, because I think about it. Because if you did believe God exists, that would affect your life. You would change your behavior in some ways. It would have to happen, because we behave based on what we believe, not what we don't believe in. If you believe God does not exist, then you might, and I'm not accusing you of anything, you might be more akin to take a man's wallet than not. I don't think you're that kind of person, but you might be, more able to do something like that. Or I couldn't do that. It's like it would rip me up. I couldn't do that. So it does matter on what we believe. I believe.
That's interesting. When you said I can't do that, in my mind before your next sentence, I thought, well, because of heaven and hell and commands and things like that. No. But then you surprised me because you said it would rip me up.
I'll tell you why.
Why do you think that wouldn't rip me up?
Because no offense, but you don't have the indwelling of the Lord in you, and you don't know what that experience is. Now, this is subjective, and I'm not offering this as proof of anything. But one of the reasons is I can never commit adultery.
Wait. Why do you think it takes a belief in the Lord for something like that to rip me up?
Oh, no, you might have certain characteristics that are woven into you from your childhood and stuff, and it could rip you up. It certainly could.
Okay.
No problem there.
Okay.
We're talking about the intellectual justification of things. I can't do that because it would offend my Lord. That's why. So whether I'm with you or my wife or somebody else or driving down the road or whatever, I cannot, steal from somebody, lie to somebody. I may make mistakes. I may not represent something accidentally, truthfully, but I would never intentionally deceive. Of course, I do exaggerate sometimes for fun, but that's it.
I think we're getting off topic here. I think we both should.
Now, let's get back to stuff. Let's get back to talking about generalities and ambiguities. Let's talk about some real stuff here. So if the statement, it's always
absolutes thing, because if this is an inference to the best explanation, and what you're saying requires the explanation that you have that I don't is logical absolutes, we really need to get clear on what this thing is you're talking about.
We're talking about God as a necessary precondition for moral objectivity.
Yeah.
See, I have a standard outside of myself, by which I can say it is wrong lie. It's morally, the action is wrong. You can't say the action is wrong.
Sure, I can.
You can say it, but you can't back it up. Is why it
sure.
is.
It just depends. Yeah, here's.
Okay, why is the action of lying wrong then?
Yeah. So if I say that lying is wrong, lying isn't always wrong, but.
So now it's arbitrary.
Why would that be arbitrary?
Well, you see, look, if lying is not always wrong, then in our discussion right now, you could lie in order to win.
Lying won't do me any good when it comes to rational discourse unless we're having factual.
You could be lying right now. You could be. You're a smart guy. You could be lying right now about that. See, I can't lie to you. I have to tell you the truth. That's a completely different worldview.
No, you can lie to me all you want and then just ask for forgiveness later.
No. That's called antinomianism, and that's refuted in Romans chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. And I get more discipline from the Lord. I don't want any of that stuff. I cannot do that. I'm not doing that.
We are so getting off topic with this. Logical when you say that I can't make a factual claim what is moral and what isn't. Okay, so rape is wrong, right?
Why is it wrong?
I've now made a truth claim about rape. Now keep in mind, Matt, that when I say rape is wrong, what I'm claiming, the truth claim I am actually making, is that rape causes unnecessary suffering, right?
Well, wait a minute.
No, I know what you're going to say. Hold on a second, though. We can
Really?
objectively evaluate whether rape fits this description of something that causes unnecessary suffering. That is not dependent on my opinion. It's not just my opinion that somebody is suffering. They are actually suffering. We can look at their brain. We can make an fMRI. We can do all this stuff. That is the objective part. Now, what you would take exception with is the fact that I have chosen to define moral or immoral in this way. But I think what you're discounting is that I can make the same objection to you. I can say...
Hold on a sec. Hold on. Let me get back to your rape thing.
Go ahead.
Okay, so rape is wrong because it hurts somebody. That there's an unconscious woman hooked up to a bunch of tubes in a hospital. She's in a coma. You are the only... Not you. I'm not accusing you of this. A man walks in, okay? A man walks in, sees her. There is nobody around. There is nobody around. And he forces himself upon her. She suffers no pregnancy, there's no disease, there's no anything, she's not aware of it, nobody finds out, so there is no harm, there's no issue of anything like that. Is it wrong then? Because now we have an action that fits your criteria. It doesn't increase harm, doesn't increase or decrease or do anything, so that rape is not morally wrong, is it?
Yeah, are you familiar with John Rawls?
No, I'm asking you this question, though. Is that situation morally right or wrong?
I'm about to answer the question. Remember how we both agreed earlier that when I say that how I define right and wrong, I'm generalizing. I'm saying it basically generally has something to do with right and wrong. Well, this is where you get into moral theory. I mean, this is what ethicists and moral philosophers have been doing for centuries without appealing to God. We talk about, well, what do we mean? I mean, is it utilitarianism? Is it act or rule utilitarianism? Is it a kind of consequential? Is it virtue ethics? We can have all those conversations, and I have many conversations about why this exact scenario that you presented me with is still wrong, despite the criteria that you just provided. And
why is it wrong?
The reason I think it's wrong, I don't think this is getting off topic again.
No, it's not.
No, we need to talk about this inference to the best explanation thing.
No. Look. We're going on circles. We're going on circles because I think what you want to do is keep me at a distance. I'm trying to get inside and get to the heart of the issue. I'm applying. We can't get to the heart of the issue without getting to what the real issues are. We're going to put some flesh and blood on this stuff, because you talked about the issue of defining what right and wrong is based on the reduction of harm, etc. So if a woman is in a coma and she's raped by a guy, there's no harm done. So by your definition, it cannot be morally wrong. If you're going to say it is morally wrong, then you're violating your own definition. You're inconsistent.
Right, but I gave you a very vague, very complete definition.
Well, then you want to be specific, but you aren't.
I'll tell you. A more specific definition would be that
I'll write it down.
It's to do with actual and potential conscious states. So, for an example, like why can't, on my view, why can't we, if we see, you've heard of the homeless guy who walks into the ER, right? And there are 5 people, one person needs a heart, another person needs a kidney, another person needs a liver, all these people are waiting for transplants, and here's this perfectly healthy homeless guy that we could cut up and give his organs to these 5 other people. Well, now we've saved a net 4 people, right? There's all kinds of little thought experiments like that. Well, why isn't it moral to cut this guy up and steal his organs? Especially since we are maximizing happiness. We're actually saving people. Why can't we do that? Well, one question that we ask ourselves is, do I want to live in a kind of world where I have to live in fear that anytime I walk into a hospital, if I have working organs, other people have the right to cut me up and give my organs to 5 other people that need them? No, we don't want to live in that kind of world. This is communism, right? This is
completely subjective. Some people may want to live in that kind of a world. Some may not. You're just arbitrarily picking that's the standard that you want. You're actually arguing subjectivity. You can't back up that that's the right standard. I've asked you a specific question. I'm still waiting because you want a direct answer. The raped woman who's in a coma, was the rapist wrong or not wrong? Remember, no harm done to her and nobody knows.
I said it's wrong.
Why is it wrong?
I just told you, and then you cut me off.
I'm I'm sorry, why is it wrong?
And then you told me I wasn't answering your question when I was answering it.
Okay, repeat it slowly. I'll type it out.
Okay, Matt, there are many moral philosophies, right, that don't appeal to God. One is contractarianism. This is the idea that let's imagine that we are perfectly, you and I, Matt, you and me. Let's imagine that we are perfectly rational beings, perfectly rational. Let's also imagine that we are now responsible for designing and drawing up the rules by which all creatures should engage one another as long as they have the cognitive capacity to make decisions and so forth. So how people should treat one another. You and I, who are perfectly rational, are now responsible for figuring out how people, how to govern interactions and behavior between people. And not only that, we have to do this, we have to negotiate this contract, you and me, behind what John Rawls called a veil of ignorance, right? So we don't know who we are. So you don't know that you're a white male. I don't know that I'm a white male. I could be a black gay Jew, right? We don't know. We don't know who I could be a child. I could be incredibly wealthy. We don't know who we are. So we cannot be blinded by our own biases and our own selfishness. So now we have the job of coming up with what is the best way to govern it if we were perfectly rational. Well, that's one way to talk about morality. And you don't need God to exist for that because it's hypothetical.
Well, you're begging the question all over the place, but you're talking about a contractual agreement, and this is what I've heard this. I've actually done a lot of research recently on ethical systems developed by non-theists, and my opinion is that they're swimming in circles trying to make sense of things, and they often contradict each other. But nevertheless, you talked about a woman has a right to expect not to be raped while unconscious in the hospital. That's a basic thing, and because she has that right to expect that, therefore, that's why rape is wrong. But that falls apart. What if some women like the idea of being forced and the idea of being raped while they're unconscious is just a sexual turn-on for them? Then the question then becomes, then if the rapist does it, then it's the right thing to do.
Well, it depends. Does the rapist know that this is what the woman wants him to do?
It doesn't matter. It's not dependent on his knowledge, but on her preference, because that's what you were saying before. People want this or don't want that. It's not the perpetrator, but the receiver. So if the receiver tends to like that kind of a thing, then when the rapist does it, it's a good thing. But if he doesn't like it, then it's not a good thing. So the same action has opposite consequences, and hence you can't have any objective standard. You're self-refuting because you have things, the same action, having opposite values.
No, Matt, you and I both would admit that morality has to do with not only behaviors but intentions. You know that.
To a degree, that's true. But when we're talking about the issue of rape, rape is simply wrong. If a woman is unconscious in the hospital, you can rest assured it's not going to be me doing the bad thing with her. Okay, it's not going to happen whether nobody knows or not. Because I know that God knows, and He would say, that is wrong, and I would not do it. So I have a standard, but you don't.
We'll get to the standard. I do want to clear this.
Objective standard.
Well, I don't think you have an objective standard.
I sure do. By definition, it's objective. By definition, it's objective because it rests in the heart and mind of God. He's other than me, other than society, other than this world, so therefore it's outside of our time.
We need to slow down and talk for one thing at a time because we're starting to get sloppy here, and I hate that. I'm sure you hate that too.
Well, I've been letting you just lead and lead and lead now for an hour.
Well, thank you. But I think I'm good at it, and I think I'm guiding us towards the core.
Maybe. Well, but I'm also taking notes on a lot of things you're saying and seeing your inconsistencies, and they're starting to pile up. And I can only let so many of them go before I say, now we've got to start talking about them. For example, this issue of a woman in the hospital being raped, you're saying it's wrong because of contractual right that she has. But what you're doing is transferring the onus from the action to the end, which is in itself an arbitrary standard. You're simply saying because it's what someone may or may not want, that's what makes it right or wrong.
I'm not.
That is by definition subjective.
No, I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. Okay, rape by definition is non-consensual, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now you just presented me with a scenario in which a woman enjoys being entered when she's unconscious. Yeah, gross, right? But okay, fine. This woman, that's her bag. That's what she digs.
She's got
Fine.
issues.
Oh, she's got issues, but hey, who are we to judge?
Who are we to judge? That's funny.
Thank you. I'll be here all week. So, so it now you already you acknowledge that morality has, on both our views, morality has to do with intention as well as behavior. So now, if the gentleman,
no, I was applying it to. Excuse me. I was applying it to your definition. You said if it reduces harm or unnecessary harm.
yes, but there's so much more to it than that. And we both
need to give me the proper definition from the beginning and not modify it after we've been spending an hour talking about what your definition is.
Wait a minute. Are you saying that I should have spent an hour like unpacking the entire moral theory before we went any further? I don't think that's what.
No, I think this. You asked me, what's my standard of morality? That which disagrees or contradicts the very nature and character of God as revealed in the Word of God. Done. I ask you, what's your standard of morality? And we've gone on for an hour. You haven't really gotten it yet. I'd like to see you codify it. Type it out. Say, here's my standard of morality.
Well, yeah, no, yeah. Let's be very clear about this. My understanding of morality, my moral system, is way more complex and nuanced than yours. But I think that's a good thing. And I think that yours is so simplistic that it suffers. And I think it's circular. I think the only standard by which you can evaluate that God is the standard of morality is God himself. Round and round you go.
What's wrong with that? Everybody has circular arguments.
If God wanted nothing but misery for everyone, that would be good by definition. Yes, now, if you're going to say that it's impossible for God to want that, or are you saying that?
Well, I'm not saying it is or is not impossible for God. I can't speak for God. By the way you say it, by definition, necessarily it has to be. It's like when I ask somebody, if you jump high enough, can you touch the moon? The necessary answer is yes, otherwise it's not high enough. When you phrase a question a certain way, there's certain logical necessities of the answer. It doesn't mean we're getting towards truth. It just means that particular question has to be answered a certain way.
Right.
If we're talking about this woman being raped, if your explanation has to be this long and that wide in order for you to get something that's morally right or wrong, then there's more room for error and misapplication of your own theory. See, your theory, where do you get your idea of what a moral absolute is? Where do you get it from? I get mine from the Word of God as revealed by God in the Bible. Where do you get yours from?
Well, that's the top down, bottom up. Remember?
Well, I mean, we've been talking for over an hour. Where do you get your morals from? Where do you, your mom, dad, society. Where do you get the real moral standard that Scott says down deep? This is it. Where's it come from?
You're interested in, of course. What else?
I'm sorry. What?
It comes from, if you're talking about like psychological motivations for me viewing the morality the way that I do, then the answer is obviously it comes from what I'm interested in.
Personal preference.
I'm interested in maximizing happiness and reducing suffering, but I'm also interested in these certain scenarios in which
you intuit.
Right?
You intuit.
Not always. Not always. I think we can use our intuitions sometimes as diagnostic tools, but I don't think we should defer to our intuitions either. I get into a lot of arguments with other atheists about intuition.
The problem with intuition is, how do you know your intuition's right? You have to intuit that your intuition. You have to intuit that their intuition about your intuition is right, and it goes on and on and on. We're not going to get anywhere.
Right. Our intuitions aren't.
That's gone. Right.
Yeah.
I may intuit something that is wrong, and you could too. But how would we know if it's right or wrong?
Because of what we mean by right or wrong, and we can evaluate it against that
standard. But if you say it's wrong because of what you mean by it, then you're being arbitrary. You're saying I'm defining right and wrong a certain way, and what I mean, if it fits that, it works it. So then, therefore, that's what is right or wrong. That's arbitrary.
I'm being arbitrary than you.
You're being arbitrary.
No less arbitrary than you are, in your view.
No, my morality rests in the character of God. Yours rests in your own character.
But you don't have, when you say that something is right or wrong, you chose what you mean by those words. You mean,
I choose what God says. He tells me rape is wrong, lying is wrong. So I know rape is wrong and lying is wrong. I know that they are because he's revealed it to me. I don't have to go inside and intuit it because
Wait. How do you know? How do you know that God is correct about this?
I don't judge God.
Well, then you've forfeited any right to evaluate morality objectively.
Oh, man, that is such a good one. I totally agree with you. I absolutely do forfeit my right to judge God. I let him be God. I don't stand in the place of God. Because that's what Adam and Eve did in the garden. When the evil one came in and said, you decide, didn't say these words, you decide for yourself what is morally right and wrong. And when they did that, pain and suffering increased in the world. That's where harm came into the world, when they decided to act in a manner outside of the revealed Word of God. What you want me to do is actually do the same thing.
Okay, so this is a problem that I see with your worldview that makes me go, not buying it. And the problem is that you could be misled into doing all kinds of terrible, terrible, terrible things.
Like what?
God said so. Right?
Like what? Like what? Be honest with you, the atheist?
Oh, you could deny the right to marry to two people who love each other very much.
Well, you know, what if I'm married to my wife? What if I love my neighbor's wife? Should I be denied the right to marry her?
That's not what I'm talking about, and you know it.
You weren't clear.
But you knew what I meant.
I know what you mean, but I'm going to go with what you said. I believe I know what you said. I'm intuiting that I think I know what you said, but I'm not going to go that far.
Do you know what the principle of charitability is?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. That's all I'm asking.
Having fun. And you know that as well. So that's why you weren't as clear. But yeah, of course, the homosexual thing is another issue of morality. But if God's going to say it's wrong, then it is wrong.
Oh. So all you mean by wrong... So see, here's the problem that I have with your worldview. Your worldview, in principle, right and wrong, can be totally divorced from real issues of human suffering and happiness, health, and well-being. No, in principle it can be. Because if God wished nothing, if God's nature happened to be such that he wished nothing but the worst possible misery for everyone, you already conceded, Matt, that that would be moral by definition.
No. I said by your arrangement of the sentence, it requires a logical affirmation. I didn't say that that would be the case or it could be the case. You constructed something that's logically necessary. I saw that and affirmed and then said it was because you constructed it that way. Doesn't mean I uphold that.
Okay, so let's take this approach then. Why pitch me your moral worldview? I mean, why would I want to adopt your moral worldview?
Well, if you want to have a Bible study with me, I do that on first and third Fridays of each night. I can put the Google Plus thing up, and we're going to be going through certain hermeneutical principles next Friday on moral studies and Bible studies. I can help you if you want to know why.
Hey, Tim. You there?
I am.
A moment ago, you typed in the chat, Scott, please answer. Would you type, Matt, please answer?
I'll tell him. Matt,
Thanks.
please answer.
Okay, answer. Ask me the question.
I just did.
What question again?
You want? Okay. Would you mind pitching me why should I adopt your moral worldview? What does your moral worldview have that mine doesn't?
Truth, and mine's the right one. Yours is wrong.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say let's stipulate that, right?
You ask why?
Why should I care about that?
Because if you don't continue to deny the Lord, then what's going to happen on the day of judgment? You'll be cast to an eternal damnation. I don't want that for you.
Okay. So the incentive for adopting your moral worldview is not really truth; it's pragmatism, right? What's in it for me?
No, you are obligated to honor God because of his nature and his essence. You're created for his glory. Isaiah 43, verse 7, which I said earlier. But I'm trying to appeal to some sensibility with you. There's a consequence to your actions.
Right. And what happens if I don't care about that consequence?
Well, then you can just not care that the train's on the track as you're walking towards the engine.
So, Tim, I think you maybe have your mic on?
Oh, sorry.
See, the thing here is, Scott, is that your denial of God, and you deny God, okay, you do. It's not just a lack of belief, but you deny God. And I'm not mocking you here. Okay. Oh, nice cat.
Yeah, right.
I have 3 cats. Yeah.
I do too. I have 3 cats.
Crap. We probably would end up liking each other. I mean, in a platonic way.
Hey, don't rule anything out, Matt. Come on, man.
Well, hey, you never know, right? That's what, yeah, you might. Well, anyway, so kidding aside, and I forgot, lost my train of thought. What was my train of thought? I've completely lost it.
Here's what I'm getting at. Okay, so you and I have these two different ideas of what morality.
I remember.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say that I do not want you to be damned. I do not want you to suffer the consequences of your position, your denial of God. Your denial of God cannot provide you with the necessary preconditions for any objective moral standard that is not based on subjectivity. You may think that you can get an objective standard by going to society or arbitrarily saying that reduction of unnecessary harm is the right standard, because that can't be justified as being the right standard other than, say, what's called argumentum ad populum. That's what the majority wants, so that's true. It's a logical fallacy. You cannot account for the issues of logical absolutes by which we're arguing here. You can't account for information. You can't account for lots of things that exist. I mean, I'm not really digressing into other areas, but your atheism does not allow you the intellectual framework by which you can justify these things. That's the problem with it. And you are arguing from a position trying to deny God over and over and over, and trying to find morality without him, just like Adam and Eve did in the garden. You want to find morality without God, and the result of that was an increase of suffering. If morality to do, and this will never happen, of course, but I could go into your house with a gun and say, hey, look, I want your painting on the wall with nothing behind it, but I want your painting. You say, no. And I say, well, I don't care what you want, because my morality is what I want. I'm deciding what it is. Bang, I take it and I go. You could complain, but you don't have any moral objective standard by which you could say I'm right or wrong. You see, that's a problem. It leads to anarchy.
There's a couple of things on the table here that now we're getting somewhere kind of interesting. One is I just want to make sure you don't really think that I believe that what is moral and what is immoral is whatever I feel like, right? I mean, I've made that clear enough, right?
I do believe that's with you.
You believe what?
I believe that you ultimately judge morality based on your personal preference.
Ooh, okay, then we're going to have to deal with that. I may have a personal preference to do lots of things that I don't do on the grounds that I have overriding moral reasons for not doing those things.
Give me one, I'll cross-examine you.
Okay, sure. God, I want to use like cheat on my wife, but I don't really want to. I don't want to do that. But let's say suppose I did. Suppose I lust after a girl and I want to cheat on my wife, but I don't. Go ahead.
Okay, so why don't you?
Because it would cause her to suffer.
So why is that important?
It's important to
you.
Me, but also my view of morality. Well, okay. Oh, sorry. Let's back this up. Now we're talking about motivations now, aren't we? We're not talking about objective truths. We're talking.
I'm just asking what your reasons are. You're the one who gets into the motive issue. That's yours.
Yes, this is completely my fault. I take the onus for this because I let myself get confused into having a conversation about personal motivations as opposed to moral.
That's what your morals are.
Now let's assume let's do this same thing. Let's assume. Oh, see, my cat is it. I love him, but I hate him. He just knocked something over in the kitchen. Let's assume that God exists.
Okay.
And I'm going to you can either pretend to. I want to do like a role-playing kind of thing here, because if we're going to go to motivations, this is really important, and this is going to actually get to the bottom of something. So you say you can be God, you can be somebody representing God, whatever. I am somebody who wants to. What's the worst thing? Molest a baby. But Christianity is true, and in this scenario, Christianity is true. God exists. Morality is the way that you define it. But that baby's right there. I'm about to do it, and you're in the room with me. So what do you say?
It's wrong to do that. And then I punch you in the head to stop you.
Well, I could punch somebody in the head and stop them too. That's not really a difference between our worldviews. So I'm about to do it. What do you say?
I say, after you wake up from the coma, I say I told you you shouldn't have done that.
No. Let's say you're tied to a chair and you can't exert physical force on me.
Oh, okay, that's different.
How do you reason with me here?
Well, I can't. You're an atheist.
Okay.
Because you don't have any objective moral standard. I can't say to you, the Lord God will take you and punish you for this if you do not repent. There's a consequence coming to you. All you got to do is say, I don't believe in. Hold on, let me finish. You got to say is, I don't believe in God. I'm just going to have my fun.
No. I do believe in God. I believe that I believe that Christianity and everything you're saying is true in this scenario. That's the bit I'm getting at.
Say it again.
In this scenario, I'm about to molest this baby, and I believe your entire moral worldview I accept. I believe it is true, but I'm going to molest the baby. So what?
Then you wouldn't be doing that. Sorry,
sure.
You wouldn't be doing that. No, you wouldn't.
Well, tell me. I'm going to do it. I want to do it.
If you believed everything that I believed, you wouldn't be doing it.
That's not true. Here I am. I'm about to do it.
No, if you believed everything I believe, you wouldn't be doing it because I believe don't do it.
You don't do it is not a belief. That's a prescription.
I believe it's wrong to do it. I believe don't do it. God is watching. It's wrong. It's morally wrong. Don't do it.
Morally wrong too, but I still want to do it, don't I? I don't care if it's morally wrong. I acknowledge.
Then you wouldn't be believing like I am.
It's not there. There's a difference between believing the truth and falsehood of certain propositions and certain prescriptions. You're conflating the two.
No. You said if you believed everything I do. If you believe everything I do, you wouldn't be doing that.
Well, give me something that you believe that would stop me from doing it.
God says it's wrong.
I totally believe that, and I don't care.
Well,
you see, Matt. You see, you asked me.
But that's an inconsistency.
Here's what I'm getting at. You're
offering me an inconsistency.
Here, a big part of your argument, Matt, is that you can't justify telling someone that they can't do this. You can't justify.
No, wait. You said I'm tied up. If you have the same worldview I do, then you wouldn't be doing that.
That's not necessarily true.
Okay. Well, if it was me, I could never do anything like that. Okay, I could never. It's not possible. I would die first. If you had the same view, it wouldn't happen.
I'm not saying the scenario is not that I am you. The scenario is that I accept all the propositional truths that you believe. And I asked you, give me one that should stop me. You tried. You said it's wrong or something. And I said, oh, I don't care.
Let me help you out. Let's change the scenario a little bit. There are Christians who know things that are wrong and still do the things that are wrong. I have to counsel them every now and then and help them with dealing with maturity and growth and not doing those things. Certainly people can do those things who adhere Christian principles. They're inconsistent. Their profession and their practice are different. And I work with them and try and get them to be consistent. But that doesn't prove that there's an objective moral or not an objective moral. Because if something is wrong, it's just wrong. An atheist doesn't have any objective moral standard by which he can say that raping a baby or torturing babies to death merely for one's personal pleasure is morally right or wrong.
No, I gave you objective standards. I gave that to you.
Your standard was a contractual agreement with society?
No, it depends on what you mean by right or wrong.
But if you say
suffering, actively true that the baby is suffering.
But what you're doing is you're defining things. This is what. All right, here we go. What you've been doing a lot is defining things in certain ways and arguing from the definitions. And I've been playing along because those definitions require certain affirmative answers. Right. But what you're not asking are the right questions. You're not talking about the actual preconditions that make something right or wrong in the action necessarily of itself. No, what you're doing is transferring the onus of the moral requirements, either good or bad, from an action to the consequence. The problem with the consequence problem is that it means that if someone likes it or doesn't like it, it becomes wrong. It's retroactive. You can never know what is right or wrong. That's one of the problems. The other problem is that when in an arbitrary system, you can't know if anything is morally right or wrong because it comes out of your own heart, your own system, your own preferences. You could never know if anything's right or wrong just as you could never know if anything is true or false because subjectivity is self-refuting. I'm trying to get through this, but I don't think you know about enough of these issues to be able to get through this part of the discussion.
Well, that's a nice assessment. Here's a big difference between your moral worldview. Okay, so your criticism of my worldview is, how can I know that something is really wrong? Right?
You can't.
Okay, so my criticism, because I'm just defining it by what I mean and what I mean.
Exactly. It's arbitrary.
Yes, it's so arbitrary. Okay, but on your worldview, why should we care about what's moral and what's not, given that what's moral and what isn't, in principle, doesn't have anything to do with real-world consequences? Because logically speaking, if God wanted nothing but the worst possible misery for everyone, that is moral on your view, and that's not a view that is something I'm on board with. So,
well, first of all, you admitted your morality is arbitrary. I'm writing it down. You just did.
The definition is arbitrary, but it's arbitrary on your view too.
But if your definition is arbitrary, we can't have any real discussion. I can't get you to say what something actually is or is not. And the reason, Scott, is because if you were to absolutely do that, then I got a foothold that I can jump all over that with. I've been waiting for you for a long time to get down to some absolutes, but you don't want to do that.
I tried so hard earlier to stay on the absolutes thing, and you kept jumping to a different topic.
Oh, go like this again.
To do the absolutes thing. I tried to ask you, what are these absolutes you're referring to?
I told you.
Put that on me.
I told you what the absolutes are. The revealed will of God as found in the Scriptures. And we could say, he says, don't lie, so lying's morally wrong. It's real simple. But I want to finish the thing you said. You asked me, yes, you admitted your morality is arbitrary. Bible moral doesn't have anything to do with real-world consequences. Yes, it does. Absolutely it does.
The consequences are the standard, Matt, not God.
No, God is a standard, but morality does have to do with consequences as well.
Why? What does it have to do with them?
If I were to rape some woman and she got pregnant, there's a consequence to my sin.
Right. What does that have to do with what makes it wrong?
No. I'm responding to your statement. You said that the Bible's morals don't have anything to do with real-world consequences. Yes, they do.
Principle. They don't.
No. Okay, we're not talking. Okay, I think I know what you're saying. Let me say this more clearly. You said the Bible's morals don't have anything to do.
In principle.
With real-world consequences. Yes, they do. They do have something to do because there's a consequence to acting badly. I'm saying that anything to do deals with the consequences. You said anything to do, but I think what you mean by is that the moral ontological necessity doesn't have anything to do with the consequence. It's not dependent upon the consequence, is what I think you mean, and I'm saying, no, they do have something to do with it in that morals affect consequences. So you're talking about the pre, I'm talking about the after, but both are covered by the phrase anything to do with.
Oh,
I think what you're saying is...
I'm not talking about consequences in terms of punishment and stuff. That's not what the consequences I'm talking about.
That's what I'm saying. You're talking about an ontological issue, about an action. Does an action have an ontological right or wrong to it? The only way we can justify anything has an ontological essence of right or wrong in an action, inherent in an action, is if we have an absolute God who would say that such an action would be contrary to his nature. Right. If you have an atheistic worldview and then actions are whatever they are, then you have to define certain things which are ultimately intuitive, which is self-refuting, and arbitrary, which is self-refuting, in order to define something to be right or wrong. And it's obviously not going to carry any weight because it's going to be self-refuting.
Okay, this is a big difference between you and I, though, that we never got to cover. You believe, and I'm not sure this is entirely consistent on your part, but we won't have time to get to that, unfortunately. You believe that actions and behaviors, their moral status is inherent. I believe that their moral status is not intrinsic, it's not inherent, what makes them moral or immoral has to do with the real world consequences paired with our intentions and so forth. Right?
Yeah, that's your view as an atheist. It has to be that.
Right.
Yeah. So, a guy who rapes a woman in a coma, there's no increase of harm. His motivation is to get personal pleasure. He's satisfied. Nobody knows about it. So, therefore, in your scenario, that rape is okay.
No. I've already explained. We talked a lot about that. I've explained why in my scenario that's not okay. Your issue is, but it's not really okay. like objectively speaking, it's not okay on high, right? That's your issue.
God says don't rape.
Words however we want to, and you have defined, when you say something is right or wrong, all you really mean is that it reflects God's nature. But that doesn't tell me anything about the way I should behave.
Sure it does.
What does it tell me?
That you should behave in a manner consistent with God's nature.
Why should I behave in a manner consistent with God's nature?
Because that's the right thing to do by definition.
Why should I do the right thing to do?
You mean you don't know that you should do what's right?
No, I'm asking a philosophical question. Why ought I do what is defined as right?
Because that's what's right by definition. That's why you ought to do it, because that's what is right. If it's right, it's what ought to be followed. If you ask why ought you follow that which is right, you're saying why I ought to do that which I ought to do.
Well, if what you mean by right is by definition that which ought to be followed, then I totally dispute your claim that God's commands are what's right. Because you haven't given me a reason, Matt, for thinking that God's commands are what I ought to do.
Because he's revealed them to you, because he is the creator. He owns the universe. He owns the stars. He's the creator of you. He has the right to declare to you how you ought to be.
Facts. You're not able to derive prescriptions from these facts. You're just making descriptions.
I just said prescription. I said the ought. So it's a deontological issue. Because in your worldview, you cannot bridge the gap between is and ought. You might have a statement, but you can't get the ought bridged out of it in an arbitrary atheistic system. We can as Christians.
No, you can't.
Yes, we can.
How can you derive an ought from give me any is in Christianity, any description, and I would love to see you try to get a prescription from that. Go ahead.
Well, why? That's the same thing. The prescription and the description are the same thing.
Here's examples of some descriptions that you just tried to put out there. God created you. God is all-powerful. God is the standard of morality. God can put you in hell. I mean, these are all descriptions. None of those tell me why I should or shouldn't do what God commands.
I've already told you numerous times. You ought to do that which is right because it brings glory to God, and He is the greatest object of worship, and He is the right standard. You ought to do that which is consistent with Him.
Okay. All right. Let me jump in here. As I'm going to mute both of you. As the three of us agreed, for some reason I can't mute Matt. Okay. No need to. As the three of us agreed ahead of time, we would wrap this up after a while. I didn't make it clear to you, Scott. Basically, around 10 o'clock, I go to bed. I need to end it. So, but as we agreed ahead of time, I'm going to give each of you an opportunity to give closing statements, kind of what you have concluded as a result of this conversation. I think it's been good. I think people are going to enjoy watching this on both sides of the debate, and I appreciate how the conversation went and you guys being here. So, Scott, let me give you up to 5 minutes to conclude, and like I said, no new questions, and Matt's not allowed to respond to you because we're just going to kind of wrap it up, otherwise we'll be here forever. But, Scott, I'll let you go first.
Okay, thanks. I can't imagine I'm going to use up 5 minutes. That's fine. Matt, thank you so much for the stimulating conversation. It's always a pleasure. Okay, so I began this conversation by saying there's two different ways that you can kind of have the moral conversation. You can talk about what you're interested in, and you can call that, you can develop that, and you can create a worldview based around that, and you can call that morality. Or you can go the other way. You can say, we have this idea of morality. How do we account for it? Who accounts for it better? The moral argument that, Matt, that you were propagating is an inference to the best explanation. So I wish we got to get more in depth into this, but the argument goes, there's this phenomenon which you call moral absolutes that you believe your worldview accounts for better than my worldview. Well, the problem is I don't believe that this thing even exists that you believe needs to be accounted for. So that's not a problem with my worldview. It's not a problem for me not to be able to account for something I don't even believe exists. This is why I came up with the tooth fairy example. It's not a problem for your worldview not to be able to account for something you don't even believe exists. So then the question is, what does exist, and God, I'm losing track here. I hate speeches. I hate just like having to talk. I like questions. So where does that leave us? You can have an inference to the best explanation that what Matt is positing exists. I don't even think that exists. So then the question becomes, well, what do you want to get out of a moral worldview? I mean, what makes a moral system better than some other moral system? What does it need to be able to do? What does it need to be able to what does it need to be able to do in order for it to be a good moral system? I have tried to argue, we've gotten sidetracked, there's been a lot of obfuscation. What I've tried to argue is that in terms of what you want your moral worldview to be able to do, there's nothing Matt's worldview does that mine can't. Matt, Matt at one point tried to ask me, like, well, how could you stop somebody? How could you tell somebody that objectively they have no right to rape? Well, but then I asked Matt to try to do the same exercise on his worldview, and there was nothing he could say that would stop somebody. So in terms of incentive, we're on equal footing, right? In terms of having a coherent definition, I argued that Matt's worldview's definition is circular. God is good because it's his nature. It's his nature because it's good. Matt is not able to objectively evaluate whether or not God can even be a good standard of morality. Because he has to use the same standard to evaluate the standard, and that's circular, and that ends up making all his moral claims vacuous. My worldview doesn't suffer from that. Matt would argue that my worldview suffers from an arbitrary definition, but again, I've said that the same is true of Matt's worldview. Matt says that what is right and what is wrong has to do with what reflects God's nature and what doesn't, but that's just what Matt is referring to. Matt was not able to give a reason for why I should do what God commands me to do. Matt was not able to derive a prescription from any description in Christianity. So in terms of, okay, so I guess the bottom line I'm saying is, we've got the inference for the best explanation. Well, I don't believe in the thing that he requires an explanation for, so that's moot. And in terms of what his moral worldview is able to do that mine can't, there isn't anything his moral worldview can do that mine can't, because every problem that he described on my worldview applies to his. I wish I got more time to go into that, because I think that is the most important thing. But that's what I tried to do in the conversation. I don't think I got to do that as well as I wanted to. But I would like to next time if I ever get a chance. Okay, thanks.
Okay, before Matt begins his closing statements, can we all agree to do a part 2 here? Scott, you keep saying you wish you had more time. Should we do that again?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, we'll work on it and try to come up with a date. Okay. Matt, your turn.
Okay, now can you hear me? I had myself on mute because I wanted to jump in. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I just unmuted you. Go ahead.
Okay, good, thanks. Yeah, Scott, I enjoyed it. I remember down in the area, we should do lunch, dinner, whatever, and just blab and continue stuff. You seem like a nice guy. But nevertheless, yeah, there is certainly circularity in both of our views. We have to start with something and argue circularity. We both presuppose the validity of logic and certain moral norms and things like that. I don't have any problem with that. It doesn't invalidate any one of our sides, at least an initiation. But we can talk about the justifications of the circularity. But nevertheless, you said, I think you said, I don't have a standard to judge God. And you're right, I don't, because it would be to say that there's a standard outside of God by which I would judge him. But that refutes the whole idea of what I believe about God to begin with. So you'd be asking me to assume a position contrary to what I believe in order to argue against God. And I don't do that. I've had a lot of people ask me to do that, both Christians and non-Christians, and I just don't do that because it's a non sequitur to begin with. Now, I think that, and we could discuss this because I don't believe, well, let me say this. I don't agree with you that you think you have an objective moral standard. I guess we could really hash that out some more. I believe that yours is arbitrary, and we could get into that. I know you say it isn't, but you know, I'm not trying to call you a liar. I'm not saying you're stupid. You're not either one of those, I hope. But I still think it's a little arbitrary, and we could work that out some more some other time. And I do say that I do have an objective standard, that the way we can find this is by simply, and you won't accept this, we go to the Bible, we see it. I know you can talk about slavery, you can talk about all kinds of stuff, and that's a whole other thing, and I'm prepared for that, but nevertheless. And so let me see, go through my notes. Yeah, okay, got that. Why is the consequence of any action the right standard? I don't believe that you justified that properly from your perspective. And certainly, since we're going back and forth so much, and I'll grant this, I could have misunderstood you in some things, and if I did, that's my fault. You know, I know that I'm not trying to. I don't believe you're trying to misinterpret me, and that's okay. You know, things like that happen, not intentionally, but. And you offered various things which I don't think were good representations of your position. I think that you might do better writing some of these things out, trying to actually codify what you would say is an absolute, or pretty much as absolute as you can get, standard of moral judgment by which you can say something is morally right or wrong. I'd be willing to have a dialogue with you, writing it out, you know, 500-word limit type thing. We could put it up on my website, whatever, if you're interested. If not, no big deal. You said nothing in my worldview can do what yours can't. Yeah, offered an objective standard based in God, offered a real life consequence to your actions and eternal consequences and things like that. Of course, you don't believe that, but that's part of the discussion now, isn't it? So yes, there are things that my worldview can do that yours can't do. I would venture to say, and you can't respond to this, so I got a slight advantage over you. I could say, yeah, and I could say, my world's better than your worldview because I can explain A, B, C, D, and then you can't say anything because, yeah, we're done, right? So I won't do that, but maybe another time we can go through some more particulars. I think that what you and I might want to do is have a more narrowed topic of discussion, and then we can, I think we could have a better time. But I did enjoy our conversation with you. You're not as obstreperous as I thought you would be, but you're a little on the obstreperous side, but not too obstreperous, so that's not bad.
All right. Well, we will work on getting together at another time and maybe having some outlined specific points of focus. And until then, thanks everybody for watching. You've been listening to a Google Hangout that happened on the BibleThumpingWingNut.com YouTube channel. And you've been listening to Matt Slick from carm.org and Scott Clifton. If people want to know more about Scott Clifton, you can go to scottclifton.com. Is that correct, Scott?
No, that website hasn't been like usable for years, but they can Twitter or you know, YouTube or any of that stuff. You can just Google him.
Yeah, Google him. Lots of things show up. So Scott Clifton. All right. Matt asked, what TV show are you going to be on next, Scott?
I'm under contract, so I'm on a soap opera right now called The Bold and the Beautiful, and for the foreseeable future, that's just my day job.
Okay, I'll have to check it out, and if you sense somehow a kind of mockery coming through, you'll know it was me.
Oh, beware! There's lots of immorality on those soap operas.
I know. I don't watch those, but maybe I'll watch just to say, hey, there he is. You know, maybe I'll do that. All right, just for fun.
All right, guys. Thanks for coming on, and thanks everybody for watching and listening.
Enjoyed it, Scott.
Thank you, Matt. Take care.
Right. See ya.